even if we ever get to the point where we are able to create some kind of life, all we're doing is tinkering around with the elements that were already there.
We are Saints in the South, your source for gospel growth and good times.
And anybody that's watching this video, I want to apologize if my quality is horrible. I don't have my normal computer, and so
apology accepted on the behalf of the viewers.
Thank you, Jackson.
No problem. All right, here we go. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Saints in the South. We have a little bonus episode for you today. We had the opportunity to be on the channel at T-Jump, guy by the name of Tom, who is a admitted and self-proclaimed atheist, and we were invited to spend a couple of hours on his show where he asked us some questions, about our belief and, in general about Christianity, why we believe there's a God, and then also kind of specifically about our belief as Latter-day Saints. And it was I will say that he was very gracious. He was very, very kind, and there was nothing.
Very respectful,
very, very respectful. Nothing combative at all about it. And so it was a good experience. It actually, honestly, it brought me back 20 plus years from whenever I had the name tag on and had the opportunity to participate in those kind of conversations on a much more regular basis as a missionary. And I really felt like a missionary kind of during those couple of hours where we were on talking and discussing and sharing beliefs and bearing testimony and everything. So what do you think? You think it was a good experience? Or
I think it was. I enjoyed it completely, which I really enjoy those kinds of discussions anyway. And Tom is a very intelligent person. You can tell by talking to him. He's a smart guy. He's one of the atheists, I think, that has actually thought through things. And, I feel like he might be what Jacob Hansen would call a serious atheist, like he has thought through, all the different like philosophical implications of, his belief system. And he understands, a little bit about the history of Christianity and other religions and, going all the way back to ancient religions. And so it was really it was a good conversation.
Yeah. Yep. Very much so. And Marcus was in there with us as well. And I think he had the same sentiments that, thought everything went good. And it was a good opportunity to be a witness of Christ, really is kind of that's how I left that conversation. It was a good opportunity being a witness of Christ for me personally stuff. So,
Yep. And definitely, I don't think anybody's minds were changed about anything in the course of that conversation.
No.
When you, I guess when you share the gospel, though, it's always a win. It's not up to us what other people choose to believe. We can share our testimony and share what we believe, and that's all we can do.
That's it. And I like how you put it. It considered it a win.
Yeah.
A good statement there for sure. Basically, what we thought we might do is we'll share a clip, and then Kenny and I may take the opportunity and just kind of elaborate, a little more on it as well, so forth. So, should we go ahead and jump in with the first clip? Okay.
Yeah, both feet first. Let's do it.
There we go. All right, let me see here.
Cool. So I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that there's no reason to believe in a God or supernatural of any kind. Could you tell me some of the reasons you believe there are for belief in such an entity? And I'd like to tell you my thoughts on those positions, hear your thoughts on what I think.
All right. So he basically comes right out there and he says, I'm an atheist. I don't think there's a reason to believe in God. Present your reasons of why you believe that we should believe there's a higher power. And so one of the things that I did not say there, and something that I've thought a lot about over the last several days since that, and I've always referenced, I say always, the last few years, one of the things that I personally reference is simply the human body. And, you know, because they talk a lot about how, you know, man, you know, creating this and we'll share some clips on, but, you know, he gives a lot of props to secularism and all that they have invented and creative, you know, that has benefited man. And so at the very basis, if man can create something that is greater than the human body, then I think we're doing something. Okay. Yes. We've done a lot of good things, right? Yeah. But if you look at just basic biology, basic chemistry, the makeup of the body, how it functions, how it works, and the intricacies that take place in the human body.
Oh, yeah.
To me personally, that says that there is a greater power than a human being. Yes. to be able to create something like this that lives as long as we do, and that, you know, recovering from injuries, and you can apply this to the animals as well, right? I mean, and how they procreate, recovering from injuries, survival instincts, you know. And I know they talk about evolution and things like that, but just the pure form of the human body is simply enough for me.
Oh yeah. Well, to me, I would look more at the complexity of the human mind, because our bodies, like you said, really, when you talk about humans in a purely physical sense, we're not much different than any other animals. And there are other animals that have sharper senses that we do. You know, there's you know, hawks and birds of prey have eyesight that is orders of magnitude better than ours. You know, like a hawk can be flying several thousand feet in the air and see a tiny mouse scurrying through a field of grass. You know, that's insane. But the human mind is just we don't understand it yet. With all the knowledge and technology we have, we've just barely begun to tap into understanding how complex the human mind is. We are literally the only beings that we are aware of that are able to contemplate our own existence. You know, no other animals do that. There's even the smartest of the animals, even when you start talking about dolphins, or there are other animals that are far more intelligent than people used to realize. You know, like there are animals that have forms of language, and there are animals that do pretty complex things that people didn't think that animals were aware of. But to our knowledge, there's no animals other than humans on the earth that are able to be self-aware in such a way that we contemplate our own existence. We think about life. We think about death. We think about the meaning of why are we here? You know, we're the only animals that think about meaning at all. And that's one of the things that to me is so magnificent, that it's something that's kind of cool to me. I just had this thought. It reminds me of the movie Jurassic Park. There was, you know, when they engineered the dinosaurs, they engineered them with like a lysine deficiency. And if you've never actually read the book Jurassic Park, side note, I highly recommend it. The book, man, I thought when I first watched that movie, I walked out of the theater going, man, that's the best movie I've ever seen in my life. I loved it so much. I bought the book. And when I got finished reading that book, I said, holy cow, that was the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. It could have been 1,000 times better. The book was immensely, which it usually is.
But anyway, that's right. Yeah, that's often the case.
So the animals were genetically engineered to have a lysine deficiency. So they were dependent for their survival. You know, the lysine was a particular thing that they had to have for survival. And so like the theory was, if the animals escaped or they got away from the care of the humans, then they would eventually die. They would get sick and they would become weak and they would die. So they were built in with a dependence on the people who designed them. And I feel like we have been designed the same way by our Heavenly Father. I feel like we have been designed by Him with a need for Him. You know, there's like a hole. I heard a preacher one time use the phrase God-shaped hole, and I loved it, because we're born with this hole inside of us that nothing else can fill. Nothing else can satisfy that need other than God, than a relationship with our Creator. The same way the animals in Jurassic Park were, you know, they relied on a relationship with those who created them for their survival. I feel like we have that. And because of that, we contemplate our existence. We contemplate the meaning of our lives. Why are we here? What's the purpose of our existence? How should we live our lives? What is the best ways to live our lives? And that's where religion comes in. And I feel like all religion is just our quest for God, our search for what we all kind of, I feel like, inherently know is there.
Right.
We all know there's something greater than us. We all know that there is some kind of God, something, that's something. It's a universal thing through all history, different cultures. Some cultures have been had a single God. They've been monotheistic. Some have been polytheistic, but almost every culture has had some kind of belief in a higher power, some kind of religion. And to me, that's a big one.
Yeah. I think and you can just take all of the creations that from the birds that you mentioned to the mammals and the fish and everything, just the amount of creation that is there. Oh, yeah. Humans can't come close to doing that. I mean,
no. Oh, I heard a good joke. I'm going to tell a joke right now.
Yeah.
See if I can remember it right, because it just popped in my head and I've heard it in years. So there's these scientists, right? And they're trying to disprove God. And so they claim that, okay, we figured it out. We can create life. We are greater than God. We're equal to God. We can create life just as good as he can. And so as they're doing their experiments, God comes down and he manifests himself to them. And he's like, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the creator of all things. And they're like, oh, you think you're so great. We can create life just like you can. We can do this and we can. So, and he's like, okay. So they challenge him. They say, tell you what, he said, okay, well, show me what you got then. If you think you can create life just as good as I can, then let me see what you got. So the scientists say, okay, so it's easy. We get some dirt and some gases and some elements here. And then we got a little bit of electricity. And then as they're about to do it, God says, hold on. Like, no, you have to make your own dirt. You have to make your own elements. You're using my elements,
That's right. Exactly.
It was kind of it's a funny, I'm sure I butchered it there, but like the point was that, like, okay, however magnificent we think we are, even if we ever get to the point where we are able to create some kind of life, all we're doing is tinkering around with the elements that we're already there.
That's right. That's right. And that's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. No matter how many great inventions we invent, we're not going to come anywhere close to what God has done. So,
oh yeah.
All right. You going to try another clip?
Yeah. Let's try another clip. See what we got.
All right, let's see what we got.
So about the personal testimony thing, like from the studies I've seen, that I would agree that religious people in religious countries do better in well-being. But when the studies are done in majority secular countries, it seems the opposite is the case. It seems like people who hold a position that mirrors that of the majority position, have a larger community, in general have a better quality of life. And the people who are isolated and don't have a community to be a part of are the ones who have a lower quality of life. And so I don't think it's specifically related to religion in and of itself. It's more related to, are you tied into the community at large, and do you have representation and people with similar values? And so I think that the studies I've seen are more representative of that. If you hold a majority position, or a position that you can relate to in a larger community, that's what benefits your well-being, not specifically religion in those contexts. Right. That's why I think that when we look at most of the Western countries, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Japan, Norway, Iceland, all of those countries except Iceland's mostly Christian, so not that one. All the other ones, right, are majority non-religious people, and they have the highest quality of life, the lowest crime rate, the longest life expectancy, the happiest, the highest on the happiness index, the highest wealth, most representation, most welfare, social security. They have all the bests of everything that we can think of, as far as I can tell. And so it seems more like the studies that you mentioned are more relevant to those that have the largest religious communities. But when you go outside of that, it seems more like that the standard to use to assess what generates the greatest quality of life seems to be more secular values and technology and wealth, more so than religious ideology.
All right.
Yeah,
yes,
that
go
was a
ahead.
big question to me because, and I'm still not going to get into all of it, but the countries that he mentioned, there are lots of other factors at play. And I don't think that religion, and I can't remember if I actually said this or not there, but I don't believe that religion or the lack thereof is necessarily the causal effect for what he's talking about. There's definitely a correlation, and Tom was he was referencing the correlation there. But I had a sociology professor that used to love to say all the time that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. And that's something to keep in mind. Like he used a funny example of he used to say that eating ice cream causes drowning. And we're like, what? Oh yeah. And he pulled up statistics that he could show us. Yeah. So you look at different times of the year where, more ice cream is sold, and the months of the year where the most ice cream, and the lines match up. Where the most ice cream are sold have the most drowning deaths. And the months that have the least ice cream sold have the least drowning deaths. So one could look at the data and say, oh, the data bears it out right here. It's obvious. It's obvious that ice cream causes drowning, right? Yeah. So that was his funny example that, correlation, there's a strong positive correlation, but correlation does not necessarily equal causation. And I think that's the thing here. There's lots and lots of other factors there. Like there's economic and social factors at play. And I don't know which factors are the causal effects. I have even heard people make the argument that one of the things that causes those societies to function as well as they do is that they are racially and ethnically homogenous. So they don't have a lot of diversity, and which is kind of an interesting observation because, there's the mantra we hear all the time that, diversity is everything. Diversity is our strength. Diversity is always better. And it's like, yeah, sometimes, but I don't know. In this case, maybe not. If you have a nation of people that are all, culturally the same, they all look the same, and they all have the same heritage, and, maybe it can be a positive thing for certain cultures. I don't know. And I'm not trying to make that argument. I'm just saying that there's a whole lot of other factors at play in those nations. And I don't feel like that was necessarily a good argument on his point.
Right. And I think he ended up throwing out Ireland or Iceland, one of those that did have a strong Christian.
He caught it quick though, man. He's pretty sharp. As soon as the word came out of his mouth, he caught it. So he's no dummy. He knows what he's talking about. He just has a different perspective.
Yeah, and that's where I'm lacking as far as being able to know what those statistics are and the background of which countries are successful that aren't very religious and which countries that aren't that are not very religious and everything. But and we ended up talking about kind of he was talking about having a strong community. Yeah. And one of the points that I made was that because we have a desire to have a strong community, that comes from our desire to have a strong family and to return to get your family from this life to the next life. That's why we are stronger together. We innately believe that and realize that. And that is, again, one of our points. And this really all comes down to, what do you believe and what do you not believe, which is the whole point of the discussion. But that is ingrained within us. A lone survivor, the lone wolf mentality will only get you so far. You have to have others to rely upon.
Yeah, I've heard it said that the celestial kingdom might not necessarily be a physical place as much as it is a state of being. And the argument, I guess the assumption there is that when we participate in the gospel and we participate in temple ordinances and we bind our families together. When we connect our families back through the generations and to each other, what we're doing is literally building heaven. And I can't remember who said that. I heard that on a Maxwell Institute podcast one time, one of their guests. So I'm sure somebody will point that out. But it was a really cool thought to me. Yeah, I can imagine, like, in my head, I pictured like a graph almost of all the different people who are connected through these sealings, you know, the couples that are sealed together and the children that are sealed to them. And then those children are sealed to the spouses. And it creates this mosaic, this framework of something that all these people that are connected together. And it is, yeah, a strong community. There's this binding of all these countless people together in love. And it's just, it's an amazing thing.
That, and make one more point about the diversity thing that you mentioned. And I think that does go a long way, whether you are in your success rate. You know, just take religion, for example. You know, spouses that have the same religious beliefs, right? I believe, and again, I don't have the statistics right here, but I think are much more successful in their marriages and in their families, right?
Yeah, mixed faith marriages are very difficult.
Very difficult. That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And so if you have a community that they are all combined in their beliefs in secularism, right, where they all believe that there is not a God, then I believe you can have a successful society, which is what he was getting at.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas, like, so, you know, this country was founded upon freedom of religion and having a strong Christian background. Now we've advanced so much where we are completely divided on that. There's a lot of us that say that we need God, and there's a whole lot of us that say that we don't need God. And because we are divided in that, and the principles that follow those two, I think is dividing the country and causing the country to collapse in on itself.
Yeah. And there's all these people criticizing Christianity, which is kind of funny to me. And it's kind of ironic because these people don't seem to understand that it's only because of Christianity that they have the freedom to reject Christianity, because most religious systems throughout history, the whole concept of separation of church and state is a uniquely Christian idea. This is something that, you know, sprang from the Christian world. This is, you know, even today, if you look at, you know, most Muslim countries, you know, there's countries today where, I know I read something one time where every single piece of paper has to have printed at the top of the paper a certain phrase, like, you know, praise to Allah, Allah be praised, or something like that. Every single piece of paper. You're not allowed. And if you have a piece of paper, any piece of paper that doesn't have that printed at the top, it is a violation of the law.
Wow.
You can be punished. You can be punished or fined or imprisoned. And the law, the religion is so ingrained into all the aspects of the law we look at that today and think, oh gosh, that's horrible, maybe, you know, but that's because we're living we're reaping the benefits of this Christian worldview where people should be allowed to have the freedom to believe what they believe, you know, because that's not the norm. That has not been the norm through most of history. Most cultures, there's a religious belief that exists in this culture, and that's the thing that binds this culture together. And if anybody tries to stray away from that belief, then, and I don't know if people ever really looked at it this way, but if they really understood it, but on a deep level, what's happening is when an individual or a group of individuals reject the common foundational belief system, it poses an existential threat to the entire culture, because you know, that belief system is what binds people together.
Right.
And so I think whether or not they were able to express it that way, I think people understood that it was important, you know, like once we all were on the same page religiously, it's important that we all kind of stay on the same page, because if people start going off in crazy directions, and I think that's why there were so many laws about heresy and all these things, you know, there was, if you said something that the church didn't agree with, you know, you could be imprisoned or burned at the stake or whatever it was.
Right.
But it really, you know, it sounds barbaric to us now looking at it through a, you know, 21st century Western culture lens. But really, you know, when people rejected the common beliefs that held a culture together, it posed a threat to the culture. And I think that's what we're seeing now. it's interesting that we have this freedom, and it's great that we all have so many we have diversity of thought and diversity of perspectives. But when we fail to respect each other's viewpoints, it starts to go badly really fast.
It's really a double-edged sword, because I mean that's what the whole agency is, what the plan of salvation is built upon, yes. Right? Outside of Christ, obviously, but everyone has the freedom to choose. It started with the war in heaven. Everybody had the freedom to choose which route they wanted to take, and and Satan said, "Hey, let's just make everybody, do the right thing." But yeah, that's not the way of God.
That's pretty cool that you said that, because that brings me around to what I mentioned, I think, before we started recording about.
Right. Yeah.
I was invited to speak in another ward this past Sunday, and the topic was, let me look it up real quick so I don't misquote it again. It's okay, hold please. Cue Jeopardy music now. Okay, the topic, my wife and I were both invited to speak, and the topic we were both given was how we gain faith and testimony in Christ through scientific and struggling times. And that seemed like a really odd topic. I've never seen a topic like that to speak on in the sacrament service, but I loved it. As soon as she said it, I was like, oh, that sounds right up my alley. I love it. And I wish I had prepared for this talk before we met with Tom, because I got some really good information that I think I could have used. And you were talking about agency. One of the cool things, I want to read just a couple lines from my talk. In an article titled, "How Can a Scientist Continue to Maintain Faith in God?" Dr. William Revel wrote, "God is not self-evident from a study of the natural details of the world, and there is no evidence that God's ongoing intervention is necessary, in order to keep the world working. It seems to me that God's existence can never be provable. If it could, then all but the insane would be bound to believe, and that would remove our freedom of choice to accept or reject God." And that's the line. I put it in bold right there. It is much more likely that we are supplied with just enough evidence to allow us to reasonably conclude that God exists, but only if we apprehend this evidence with all of our faculties. And that, when I first stumbled across that quote, man, it gave me chills, because it's agency. It's all about, and this isn't a member of the church. This is a different, a Protestant Christian, but he's a very, very, excellent writer. Had a lot of really, really good things to say in the whole article, but that line really hit me, because I'd never quite thought about it that way. That, if God could be provable, then like you said, all but the insane would be bound to believe, and that would remove our freedom of choice.
That's right.
And we have to have there's enough evidence there to choose to believe in God. There's plenty of evidence if we choose to believe it.
Yep.
But he also talks about apprehending the evidence with all of our faculties. And in that article later on, he goes to talk about that. It's not just looking at the things that can be physically observed and measured. It's when you take into consideration our ability to reason and our ability to love, and all of these things, all of the emotional and psychological and spiritual components that we have that are a real part of our lived experience. When you put all these things together, the evidence for God is overwhelming.
Right.
But obviously it cannot be proven. And that's the point that I tried to make to Tom through the whole thing. It's like, no, obviously I can't. I mean, to me, I always cringe when I hear people, I've heard different preachers be, I can prove the existence of God, because it just makes me cringe right off the bat. So I'm like, no, you can't.
You can't. Right.
You can't. You cannot prove God any more than anyone can disprove God by definition, because if you would, then all this would be meaningless. There would be no reason for faith.
There
would be no reason for us to even have our ability for reason and logic. We wouldn't, because we all know what the truth is. It's indisputable. But that's not the case.
Wow. Yeah.
And God doesn't want us just to react on an emotional level, but he wants us to use the intelligence that he's given us to look around us and examine things, examine the evidence, to think about it and reason. And that's why I feel like that there's very, very intelligent and reasonable people who are deeply religious. There are obviously intelligent people who are not.
Right.
But yeah, I think some atheists try to make the assertion that religious people are somehow less intelligent or something like that. And that's ridiculous, because throughout history, including today, some of the brightest minds that have ever existed have all been deeply, deeply religious people.
And why? So why is that necessary that we have to go through that reasoning, that faith seeking, faith relying when we can't prove it? I mean, what good does it do for us in the end?
Oh, I think you're getting at a point here, aren't you? I like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's all about for me, it's all about our progression, because we in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe that we are literal children of God, and God has created us to become like him. And we do have the potential to become like God. And it's something a lot of people take exception to.
Right.
But you know, he has given us all the things we have, all of the ability to reason, all of our intelligence comes from God, and he wants us to use it. He doesn't want us to just stumble around and rely on him for every little thing. He wants us to have to struggle a little bit. He wants us to have to think about things. You know, it makes us better. It makes us stronger. It makes us more, it brings us closer to God.
Yeah. And I referenced the scripture on there with Tom about the more knowledge we gain in this life, right, the greater advantage we will have in the world to come. You know, it would have been an interesting point to bring up about because the title of his podcast show there of our episode, it's Saints in the South, and their Latter-day Saint belief in Christianity or something. I can't remember it right now, but basically it was from the Christianity from the perspective of Latter-day Saints.
Yes.
What was
Latter-day Saint Christianity, which, so yeah, his, the guy that reached out to us for him that does his scheduling and stuff was really, really Jeff Enns, great guy. He was the most cordial, respectful person you could possibly imagine. And he referred to us in, you know, his initial email as Latter-day Saint Christians, and then asked us, is that, I apologize if that's offensive, not correct. What if there's a better way to say it, what would you recommend? And, you know, I was like, dude, that's great. That's great. Yeah. That's better than 99% of non-members of the church would do right there. You know, that is, you know, Latter-day Saint Christians. Thank you. Yes.
But an interesting point to him, it would have been interesting to see what a response would have been, but the point to make on our stance that we do believe that we can become, and Heavenly Father intends us to become as he is.
Yes.
Right. Having the ability to create beyond this world. It would have been an interesting to see what his reaction or thoughts would have been to that. So,
okay. Reasons to believe in Latter-day Saint Christianity. There it is.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Looked it up right here on the fly, right in front of all of our audience. All 12.
There you go. Well, you ready for another clip?
Really quick, I want to add one more thing before we move on. I found another piece of that quote from that I just quoted, Dr. William Revel, and I might be mispronouncing that, but he went on to say that I believe the appropriate way to approach such a large question as the existence of God is by the apprehension of the world with all of our human senses. That is, using our wisdom gained from experience, our intuition, our capacity to love, our emotions, in addition to our analytical minds. If the question is approached exclusively through logical scientific analysis, one would probably come to the same conclusion as Bertrand Russell. And he, in the beginning of his article, he started talking about Bertrand Russell, which, if y'all don't know, was a very, very prominent philosopher, very devout atheist. He was what's really known as the materialist, materialist philosopher. Like his philosophy was based on the real world exists in that which we can apprehend, which we can see, feel, touch. Anything outside of that is purely our imagination. If we want to be bounded in reality. We have to focus on the things that we can see and feel and touch. So yeah, Bertrand Russell would disagree, and that's why he used him as an example. Like, so Bertrand Russell was obviously a extremely intelligent man. You know, let's see, one of the great philosophers. But so yeah, he would have rejected the idea of apprehending the world, as Dr. Revel said, through our wisdom gained from experience, our intuition, our capacity to love, and our emotions. Because to Bertrand Russell and pretty much any of the materials philosophers, those things are all subjective. Those things are all just, our emotions and our intuitions are nothing more than a result of chemical activities within our brains. And so for us to try to determine the nature of reality on those things is, you know, for them would be standing on sand, you know, the building your house on the sand, so to speak,
yeah,
because those things aren't
very
things
unsure. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. Gotcha.
All right, let's move on.
All right.
So one question I normally have when talking about like afterlives or pre-lives would be, couldn't we just say the same thing under atheism? We could say that there is an afterlife, or say that there is a pre-life that we just haven't discovered yet of some kind. And those alternatives seem to me equally as supported as positing a God to accomplish the same thing of having an afterlife or a pre-life. So why would we believe that having an afterlife is more likely under a God than under naturalism?
That was
yeah.
You made the point that you'd never really heard that from an atheist. Was that right?
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I enjoyed that. You know, that really got my mental gears turning.
Right. Yeah, I hadn't heard it either, because and he actually kind of talks about you know, if you're about possibly even existing right after we die, but he made the point of not existing as what you were here, right? As something completely different, right? Was that a point that he made?
I think it was. But I do know that the main question I had for him was like, it was an interesting question, but to me that question begs the question of a creator. Like, if there is a such thing as eternity, if there is a such thing as a soul or whatever, you know, whatever it is, you know, if there's a part of us, a part of our knowledge or a part of our memory that continues after we die, after our bodies die, then what is that? Like, what is the cause of that? Because, and I don't think I mentioned this, but it seems to me that the very assertion itself kind of pulls out of the realm of materialism, because the existence of a soul, or a pre-existence, or, you know, an afterlife would not fit in with the whole materialist worldview. You know, it's not, if we are basically biological machines that have evolved to reproduce ourselves, and through evolution, you know, evolution has guided our development as, you know, the survival of the fittest, you know, those who were the best fit for their environment, you know, best suited for their environment, are the ones who were able to survive and then pass on their genes to the next generation. Then if you believe in all that, then it did seem like a strange question. Like, so where would this soul come from? So it was an interesting question, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
The idea of the existence of eternity without the existence of a God.
Yeah, that's
it's kind of a conundrum to me.
It really is. I mean, that's even more mind blowing to me than trying to figure out where it all started. Right. Yeah. You know, yeah. I'd never heard that thought process from an atheist. So, all right. We'll try another one here.
Of course, as an atheist, I think it's more evolutionary property that we built communities as a means to survive better and be more successful in interacting with the environment. And so from my perspective, I don't see a reason to think God is a part of that dynamic, and that we can explain that better with secular means. And those secular means seem to be more descriptive of reality than the religious texts, as far as I can tell.
Essentially, like, he didn't explicitly say it there, but I think part of what he was getting at was the the application of the scientific method and the application of looking at the world in a way that of what can be observed and what can be measured and what can be, what can be determined based on what we can see, feel, apprehend with our senses, so to speak. And this, hold on a second. This goes back to another interesting point in preparation for my talk last Sunday. I found a really, really cool article. It was actually a talk by a Dr. Terry Ball, who is a professor of religious education at Brigham Young University. And he proposed 2 principles related to faith and science. Principle 1, faith enhances the truths learned through the scientific method. And there's some really good stuff there. I won't go into all of it. And principle 2, faith has an application in the scientific method as well as in religion. So this whole thing was basically getting at the point that faith and reason are not 2 separate things, and they're definitely not 2 opposing things. There are things that work hand in hand. Faith and reason support each other. And this one little piece really stood out to me. He said the scientific method demands that the data gathered and the conclusions drawn from an experiment must be reproducible by anyone who follows the procedures of the original experimenter. As Latter-day Saints, we believe that the experiment by which one can gain faith, as outlined by Alma, does indeed meet this criteria. And this, in part, helps explain the success of the missionary program of the church. In a sense, our missionaries challenge investigators to be quote-unquote scientific by conducting this experiment on the Word, with the promise that if they follow the procedures and carefully analyze the results, they too will come to the conclusion that God lives and that the restored gospel of Jesus Christ is true. And that was another really, it gave me chills in just reading it, because I've never thought about it that way either. I've never thought about, what our missionaries do as an application of the scientific method, but essentially it is. They're saying, okay, this has happened. This same phenomenon has happened time and time and time again with other people. So you apply the scientific method. You reproduce this experiment. You read the Book of Mormon. You pray if it's true or not, and you see what kind of feelings you get, what thoughts enter your mind, and see if you feel like it is true. And so it's really cool, because I had never, I don't think ever in my life thought of it that way, thought of sharing the gospel as an application of the scientific method in that way. So
Alma talks about it in that way, about taking, having an experiment upon my words.
Yes.
He talked, maybe check.
I've read that, and I still didn't think about it quite to that level of,
right,
applying the scientific method as we understand it today. I was like, oh yeah, an experiment. It is, blah, 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 but I don't know, something about that. Just, every now and then you read something that just clicks,
takes you to another level, makes it a lot more clear. That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
That was a big one for me there. Yeah. I loved it.
Good. Share another one here.
Yep. So I'm going to read that while you're looking. And merely saying, accepting, and believing are not enough. They are incomplete until that which they imply is translated into the dynamic action of daily living. This, then, is the finest source of personal testimony. One knows because he has experienced. He does not have to say, Brother Jones says it is true, and I believe him. He can say, I have lived this principle in my life, and I know through personal experience that it works. I have felt its influence, tested its practical usefulness, and know that it is good. I can testify of my own knowledge that it is a true principle.
That's perfect.
Damn, love it.
That is it. Let me look.
And that's a good. It really is too. That might not be a complete testimony, but that is a very good foundation. And that is, I know you've had my stepson interviewed him on the podcast before on his mission. Yep. And one of the things Jacob on it, I mean, I can say without any reservation that Jacob is one of the most intelligent humans I've ever spoken with in my entire life.
Right. Yeah.
He's crazy smart. He's way smarter than me, way smarter than I'll probably ever be.
And
I live to be 200 years old. But because of his intelligence, he does have a very analytical mind. And when he was preparing to leave on his mission, he didn't have a full testimony of all the precepts of the gospel. And he was open about it.
Right.
When he had his interviews with the bishop and with the stake president, he didn't hold anything back. He was completely honest. And the only thing that he could say that he had a strong, solid testimony of before he left for his mission was that living the gospel is a good thing.
Right.
That he's seen so many people. He's seen in his mother's life and my life and all of the people he knows. He's seen the difference in their lives. He's seen the difference between the active, faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the whole rest of the world. You know, he was able to see a difference there. Said there's something here, and even if he couldn't tell you for sure what it was, he knew that there's something here that is valuable, there's something that's true, because there's something that transforms people's lives and it brings them a greater joy than anything else the world has to offer.
He in the interview that we had, he made that point, and I found the scripture in Alma chapter 32, which goes right along with exactly what you're saying about Jacob. Now, as I said concerning faith, that it was not a perfect knowledge, even so it is with my words. You cannot know of their surety at first unto perfection, any more than faith is a perfect knowledge. But behold, if you will awake and arouse your faculties, even to an experiment upon my words, and exercise a particle of faith, yea, even if ye can no more than desire to believe, let this desire work in you, even until you believe in a manner that ye can give place for a portion of my words. And then he goes on and comparing the word to a seed and so forth. So, but I love that about Jacob's testimony, is that he had and it's what I told him, he had the wisdom beyond his years to recognize that he had seen people in his life, because of the gospel, had created and done a lot of good.
Yeah.
And so he knew that he wanted to be part of something good. And this was a place to start. And he exercised, right, those thoughts, those feelings, those beliefs, and it ended up growing into something great.
He acted on that seed of testimony, so to speak, and it grew. Just like the scriptures promise.
That's it.
You plant that small, tiny little seed, and you nurture it, and it will grow.
That's right. All right, let's see. Got another one right here.
Today, there are better ideologies. You mentioned you thought religion was the biggest force for good in the world. Now, I would put it at science and technology. I think those are a much greater force for good in the world by many orders of magnitude. And I think that's why many people have left religion, because religion isn't doing as much as these more human enterprises. Like my favorite example is Norman Borlaug. Norman Borlaug invented genetically modified wheat and rice. And that one invention is known to have saved over 1 billion lives on its own. And that's far more than what I think the cumulative effect of pretty much all religious institutions have had less of an impact there. Specifically like healthcare, government-based healthcare, NHS, Social Security, welfare, those kinds of things have also saved about 1 billion lives in total, which again seems to dwarf all of the effects of any churches and the amount they've helped. They have helped and have done many good things for people in poverty, and helping the homeless and giving people food and childcare and all kinds of things. But the cumulative effect of any scientific enterprise, electricity, just general relativity for science and doing satellites and different kinds of guiding people out how to do things and how to build planes, like all of the different penicillin scientific inventions, each one of them seems to do as much or greater good than the entire institution of churches as a whole in the world. And so I'd probably put science and technology as a far greater force for good than religion was. But I do agree with you that at the time period, religion was probably the greatest influence in the world 2,000-3,000 years ago, and had more of a positive influence than any other ideology at the time period.
And I don't understand this, why they have a tendency to separate the two, right?
Yeah.
Because the desire, and one of the points that we made, the desire to do good innately comes from God. from the light of Christ and these inventions and everything. And again, he got into talking about what human have created and invented and everything. It's still, although it's great, right? But it's still not any greater than you and I sitting here, right? The creating life. And I don't know, any thoughts?
And I think, I think there's a point that I didn't really make there because I don't think it would have been effective with him. But when he's talking about the good that religion has done versus the good that human secular institutions have done, he talks about, amelioration of suffering of people in poverty and things like that, which is all good. Those are all very good. Those are admirable things. But when it comes to what really matters, when it comes to, I think, understanding the true magnitude of the good that religion, quote unquote, has done, is you have to take an eternal perspective. And that's where I think the big difference is. And that's one of the things that,
where the big gap is.
Yeah. That's, for some reason, I don't know why, but there was when I was serving as Sunday school president in our ward, I know there was the way I had it set up, I kind of made myself the built-in sub. So any Sunday somebody wasn't there, I was like, okay, let me know and I'll teach your class, So this is the sub, and I got to teach a lot because, there's very often somebody's not going to be in church. But in my conversations with the youth, especially, man, those kids are so smart. And one of the things that I kept feeling impressed was eternal perspective. And I don't know if I ever really thought of it, but ever since I served as Sunday school president, that's something that has stuck with me. And I always go back to the eternal perspective, because what Tom was saying, when you compare those two things, if you compare what religion has done and you compare what, human institutions, human secular organizations have done, if you look at the good that they've done in this life, there's argument. I could see it going one way or the other. It's not, but if you look at it from an eternal perspective, the religion is, as Tom said, by orders of magnitude larger, because these institutions, they might be able to feed a starving person. They might, be able to help a sick person be well. And these things are all good. Those are awesome, great, admirable things. But those things do nothing to guarantee your eternal salvation. They do nothing to guarantee your understanding of what's required to return to live with God when you die. Right. And those are the things. So that's where religion has gone immensely better. Religion not only puts food in people's bellies and heals sick people and educates children, it helps people to think about, to seriously ponder and reason out the reasons that they exist here. Why am I here? What should I do? What is the purpose of life? How should I live my life in such a way that is meaningful? And that's the things that, to me, really make the most impact overall.
And which I think leads to many great charitable acts and inventions of things that end up helping people, right? We all want to have, I've had this, I have this personally, yes, I know the ultimate goal is to return to live with Heavenly Father, with my family, right? That's the ultimate goal, right? To pass this earthly test. However, at the same time, I want to have an impact on this earth and the people on this earth while I'm here. Right. I don't want to just, I want to be able to look back and say, you know what, I've had the opportunity and I've made the opportunity to do some good things for people and
don't hide your light under a bushel.
Don't hide your light under a bushel. That's right. I have my wife she makes, shirts and stuff. And she made me a shirt the other day. I say the other day, a couple months ago. It was actually when after my grandmother passed away, the last of my living grandparents passed away. And, she was 96 years old, 95, 96 years old when she passed away. But talked about her, thinking about her legacy and all of my grandparents' legacy. They lived great lives, set great examples and everything. So the T-shirt I asked her to make was "Leave a Legacy."
Yeah.
And that's what I think that a lot of people are striving to do. You know, you want to leave some kind of legacy, even if it's small, even if it goes straight down your line, right? And you don't necessarily go outside of your family. You want to leave a legacy at a minimum for your family.
Yeah,
So,
she was a true matriarch of just yeah. So yeah, it's tragic, and the thing that I'm just having this thought. I'm trying to think of how to express it, like, because the people who are remembered the most fondly when they die, generally speaking, are the ones that had the biggest impact on others. Right. You know, like there are people. Sadly, there's people that die every day that nobody knows and nobody cares. You know, like there's people that live by themselves that somebody finds them. The landlord goes to check on them one day because they had to pay their rent and they're, you know, they've been dead for 3 weeks in their recliner and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But then there's people like your grandmother who raised, oh my gosh, who raised children and grandchildren and lived an example and taught and just affected the world in such a positive way, because it really could be said that any positive, any good things that you are able to do in the world right now could be, at least in part, attributed to her. Because
that's right.
If she had not lived the life that she lived, you might not be where you are right now.
That's absolutely.
So that's awesome.
Yeah. All right, I think I got one more here. This here's the
why do we need the religion for that? It seems like the secular worldview is all about progress. We like science very, very much. We like healthcare and welfare very, very much. And you guys seem to be attributing, as typical of many religious people, is that they like to attribute science and healthcare and welfare to religious identities of the past. But at the same time, it seems like it's kind of an excess addition. Like, we don't need it. We just get rid of the religion and still have all of the good stuff. All of the healthcare, all of the social security is done by a secular government that is separate from the church. All the science is done from secular scientists that is separate from the church. You don't need the church at all. It seems to apply nothing to any of these things. And so I would consider them separate entities. These are you mentioned that churches did much of the healthcare in the past, and that's true, but it didn't start with churches. Churches simply took those ideas from communities of people who were helping the people in need at the time period and tried to make them into a ideology or a principle that is grounded in their religious beliefs. But it didn't start with religion. Helping other people has been a thing since the crescent absent of it's human nature. It's kind of like we've always been like, we should probably care for that person who's dying over there, not just let them die.
So it was kind of the same thing that we were just talking about, but there was one other point that I wanted to bring up with that. So he references these government programs, Social Security, right, welfare.
Yeah.
Okay, what are these government programs? These government programs are literally taking from other people and giving to who they consider in need, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The church religion, okay, again, getting back to agency, the freedom of choice, what we believe and what we encourage is to freely give of others, and to give of yourself to help others, rather than taking from one people and giving to another.
Yeah.
Now I know you end up getting in politically, right? When you start talking about that, but you think about the law of consecration, right? Where you give, and the law of consecration is not you give everything to someone and they evenly distribute it. That's not how law of consecration works. Law of consecration is you use what you need of your choice, you use and keep what you need, and then you give everything else in excess to everybody else. That's the law of consecration. It doesn't have anything to do with somebody in power taking from you or from a people and giving to another group. And that's what secularism involves.
Yeah. And it robs people of the blessing of giving freely, because
that's right.
in a welfare
of
state
choice.
where
Right.
your money is taken by force. You don't I don't have any choice, man. My check, and it makes me sick when I look at how much taxes are taken out of my check every month.
Right.
It makes me sick to my stomach. I don't have any choice about that. It is what it is. The government's going to take it and they're going to do whatever they want to with it. Sometimes some of it might actually do good things. But the thing is, I don't know. I don't know what
have that choice. That's right.
My money. Whereas when I give freely, like when I make donations to, when I either pay my tithing or I make a fast offering, especially in the church, is a big one. Tithing we understand to be 10%. Fast offering as a general rule is, when we fast, we fast for 2 meals and whatever we would have spent on those 2 meals. However, I have heard a lot of people say that the fast offering, that's not a hard and fast rule. Like if you want more blessings, you give more in your fast offering. And I've heard it's one thing Glenn Beck has talked about a lot. He does a fast offering. If he feels like life is getting rough and he needs blessings, they'll double their fast offering, triple their fast offering, whatever it is. Because when you give that fast offering, you're freely giving. And there's people that are benefiting from that, people in your ward, people in your community, and you're blessed for it. Like your life becomes better. You have not only the good feelings, but you get all the spiritual and temporal blessings that go along with that. And yeah, the organizations like Tom was talking about, kind of, they rob us of that part. They take that part completely out of the equation.
They literally rob it. And there is an argument to be made that we would have a greater abundance of people, better, maybe less poor among us, if we didn't have a government situation where they reach in everybody's pockets. Yeah. Because they're reaching into our pockets, we end up having to be a lot more stingy, right? Yeah. With our finances and belongings and everything.
And there's a lot more people that are reliant on the government, and they don't see any problem with it, because it's the government has billions and billions of dollars. Yeah. And I deal with, when you work in the community, when you work in community mental health or any of these things, it's like you see it all the time. There's so many people that their goal in life is to live off the government. It really is. They have no intention of working, no intention of producing anything worthwhile. They're like, no, and there's no shame in that. They have no shame in saying, oh yeah, I plan on getting a check, and I plan on getting food stamps, and I plan on getting this and that and the other, and blah, blah, blah. And it's different. It's different if you're in a situation where there's people that are giving to you that, they're giving what they have that they worked hard for. It's a difference. If I'm looking somebody in the eye and I'm pulling money out of my wallet that I worked hard for, and I'm handing them cash, this is the cash that I worked hard for, man. I put in overtime for this money, but here you go. This is for you. Then it's going to hit them a lot different than it is just getting a check in the mailbox from the government. It's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same, because they in reality, they're living off of their neighbors' hard work, where the government has taken the money from their neighbors and turn around and give it to him, giving it to them. So that's and that's ultimately the law of consecration is a law that we're going to have to figure out how to live one day. We make covenants to live the law of consecration, and again, it's everybody coming together and doing it collectively, and of your own free will. Nobody's going to be forced to live the law of consecration, right? Where we are forced to pay taxes and to and to give of our hard-earned money. So anyway,
and there's one more point that I'd like to make on what Tom said in that last clip, because there's something I don't think I expressed when he's talking about the innate desire. He made the argument that the desire to help those in need is kind of a universal thing, because it exists in different cultures and throughout time, and this, that, and the other. What he failed to mention, what the part that he failed to add on to that, is that does exist within the in-group. You know, we know there's been a lot of research done into like in-group, out-group bias, and the in-group is whatever whether it's people that share your religion or your race or your traditions or whatever it is. People have always had that empathy toward their in-group, and that is evolutionary, because the people in your in-group are people that are going to carry on your genes, or going to carry on your traditions. They're part of you. They're part of who you are, and their survival is your survival. However, the thing that was different when Christianity came along is that Christianity said, no, you be nice to everybody, not just your brother, not just your family, not just
love your enemy.
People. Yes. Love your enemy. And it gives me chills, because that was the thing that was different. That Jesus was radical at the time. And the thing is, this is the argument I make with atheists, is that they don't understand that what they take as a given, this foundation of, people believe we all know what's good and bad. Like, no, we don't. Because this is the things that Jesus taught that at the time were absolutely ridiculous to so many people. They're like, what are you talking about? Look at this crazy religious teacher over here talking about loving your enemies. What kind of idiot does that? It was completely contrary to conventional wisdom for most people. It really was. Even the religious people, because the Jews, and I'm not being ugly, but the Jews were kind of racist. They were very much about themselves. They were very much about
they were God's people.
That's right. They were God's people, and anybody that wasn't one of them was what?
An enemy.
A muggle, a Gentile.
Gentile, right?
Because and that's the in-group, out-group bias. And I love the example of like the Vikings, for example. So when Christianity had spread to Europe, and I think I mentioned this in our conversation with Jacob Hansen, and I can't remember. I might have gotten it from him in the first place. I can't even remember. but like, so the Vikings, though, had a different worldview. They had not been exposed to Christianity, and the Viking people obviously they had a lot of empathy for themselves. They were, caring. The mothers were caring mothers who nurtured their children, and the fathers would, protected their wives and children, and they went out and they provided, and they by all means, they were good people. They were the salt of the earth when it came to their families and their communities.
Right.
But when they sailed across the sea and they saw these Christians all cloistered up in their little churches talking about loving their enemies, they're like, what kind of idiots are these people? And they had a different idea of what is good, because to them, what is good is becoming the best possible version of yourself you can be. And for them, the best possible version was, like, for example, like wolves. Like the best wolf is the one that's the best hunter. The best wolf is the one that's the leader of the pack, because he can be dominant over all the males. He can beat all the other males in a fight. He can hunt. He's the best hunter. He's the best this. He's the best that. And so that's how the Vikings saw themselves. They were like, well, if you want to be a good man is the man who's the best fighter, the best hunter.
They were conquerors.
Yeah, they were conquerors, and that they believe, and they didn't think that they were bad. It's like we see everything. We're so short-sighted when we see everything through our little lens. We have our little, 21st century Judeo-Christian Western culture lens, where everybody believes in being kind to people. Like, no, that's not a universal ethic. That is not a universal ethic. And like for the Vikings, it was ridiculous, because they saw the Christians as inferior people. They saw the Christians as people who were not living up to their potential, because they weren't focusing on being warriors. They weren't focusing on being hunters.
Passive,
they were
too humble.
Yes, they were passive. They were, to the Vikings, these were bad people. These were the bad people. They deserve to be conquered because they're bad people, because they're not living up to their potential. And it is if you really try to look at it from the different perspective, from like the Vikings perspective, for example, the ideas we have of good and bad are not universal. They never have been.
Right.
The things that we in our culture, in Western society today, take for granted to be good or bad are built on the foundation of the Judeo-Christian framework. And that's what they tend to ignore.
That's it. Very good. Well, I think that's go ahead.
Yeah, just good stuff.
Yeah,
good stuff overall.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to end there. So, again, it was a fun conversation with Tom, and I think I'm glad we did this here. It was it's been fun to kind of rehash some of the things, some of the points that we made, and had the opportunity to kind of expound upon some of the points that we wanted to make as well.
This was a good idea. I'm glad you thought of this. There are things I know that both of us, were like, man, I wish I'd have said this.
There's always that
always
for sure.
that,
For sure. Very good. Well, all righty. Until next time, y'all keep on striving.